Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome along to the Deal and Eli Masterclass. This is seminar 1 of 3. I'd like to introduce myself. So my name is Chris McAlpine. I'm the ILC here at the Melbourne campus. And secondly, we've got Dylan Eli, who's coming to us from his studios in LA at the moment. So I think it's around about 11 p.m. there. So thanks very much for staying up late with us and taking us through everything. How are you, Dylan?
Doing good. How's it going with you, Chris?
Yeah, right. We've been working on this seminar, or these 3 seminars, for a little while now. So it's showtime. So I guess we might start off briefly, if you will, with just a bit of an overview about your career and where you are now and what you do.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Well, welcome to my studio here in LA, Porsche Street Studios. First off, I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you, Chris. Thanks to SAE, and thank you to all you guys, gals out there that I can't see. But definitely grateful to be here, and this is going to be fun. So I guess, a little bit of my career from start to finish. I started in the interest of audio engineering started when, me and my friends were in high school. Of course, I loved music, but, we DJ'd, and through that kind of wanted to get a little bit more into the technical side of music. So my high school offered a audio engineering class. Thought that might be kind of cool to do. Took it and kind of just fell in love with it from that point on. Started staying every day after school till midnight doing sessions. The studio at school had a really cool studio. They would do sessions for like donations and gear up, keep and stuff like that after school. So that's kind of where my love for it started. And then, I just decided that's what I wanted to do. So I started interning at a studio in Denver, Colorado, where I'm from, even while I was still in high school, and then decided to kind of take it to the next level and do some studying in college. One of the competitor schools is where I ended up going, but I had what was great about school was I made a lot of connections, and that's one thing. You'll hear some that kind of theme throughout this masterclass and probably all the masterclasses, that this industry is a lot about who you know. That's just pure and simple, building and maintaining relationships. So anyway, some people that I met in school when I graduated, I just kept in touch with them. I proceeded to work at another studio in Colorado, the kind of like the biggest, best studio there, because that was in my head. I just wanted to learn and be involved in the biggest and the best stuff. Granted, this was a really long time ago. This was in 1996 when I first started. And coming up, I guess I'm kind of lucky because I came up in sort of the tail end of the analog age and was around for the, beginning of where digital recording was starting to go. The quality of digital stuff wasn't quite there, in the earlier part of my career. So we were still doing, everything on tape. Like, as you see here, I still have a tape machine here in my studio. My roots kind of go back to the analog tape world. So I really learned from a lot of guys, producers, engineers coming up that were, old school, and I learned how to cut tape. I learned how to edit on tape. I learned how to manipulate tape and, hit it harder to get certain sounds and things like that. So I think that helped me a lot later on in my career. Excuse me, being able to know the difference and have a lot of experience working with the real thing. Now there's a lot of tape emulation programs and plugins and, hardware that's emulating something else. So that stuff's great and it sounds cool and it's a tool, it's great, but it's kind of, I feel very lucky in being able to actually using the real gear for a lot of my career to kind of have a basis of comparison. So anyway, moving forward, my first kind of big break was when I got a call from one of my roommates from college. He was living and working in Chicago at the time, and he was engineering for R. Kelly, the infamous R. Kelly. And he said, "Hey man, we need people out here." And he knew I was working in the studio for a while and, people that were good. So he said, "Come on out." So I went to Chicago, and that's really where I started kind of my professional career. I had just been interning before that, and assisting and working on friends' bands and things like that. But when I moved to Chicago is when I kind of got thrown into the fire. At that time I was still pretty young. I was 18 years old. So I, pretty much moved out of the house and just went full bore into the recording studio world. The I did a lot of really cool, fun, interesting stuff in Chicago. Of course, R. Kelly, which I learned a lot from. Working with him was, whether you like the music or not, he's very prolific. We would basically start and finish sometimes 3 or 4 songs a night, and they were all hits, if you will. So yeah, I mean, that was definitely you had to be on your game and be really fast, efficient. And like I said, I learned a lot both from the engineering side and really honed my kind of tech chops and punching in, punching out, that kind of stuff, editing quickly. But I also learned a lot about production and, just the writing process. So that was really cool. I did that for about 2 years. Excuse me. And then after kind of doing that, that was pretty hardcore too, as far as hours. We'd put in 50-hour days. I know that sounds weird, but he just worked so much and nonstop. He didn't want to break up the flow of things. So if we were working on a song, we basically saw that song through. If that took 2 days, you were up for 2 days straight working on it. Me and a couple other engineers, we'd have a little bit of a ongoing competition, a tally on who could stay up the longest and still function. So if that tells you anything, to not to get on the soapbox or anything, but if this is like a career that you really want to pursue, I think it's a hard, it's a challenge, with that kind of endeavor specifically. You have to really be able to put in the hours and have the dedication and drive for that. So just be cautious that you may have to put in those hours. So yeah.
Just for context there, just talking about your time interning back in Colorado, like how many years would you say you were interning before you jumped over to Chicago?
It was almost about 2 years, all unpaid, was doing everything. It was a larger studio, but still pretty small in the scheme of things. So I was the only I was kind of the everything guy. I was the intern and assistant, so I was getting in before the session, cleaning up, cleaning the toilets, taking out the trash, helping out during the session. And then when everyone left, cleaning up and setting up and, for the next day, those kind of things. So it was a little of everything.
I guess just for those starting out, like how long would you say, like into that 2 years, doing all the sort of like lower level jobs, like cleaning the toilets and whatever else, did you find that you started to get given more responsibility and started to get into the real deal?
I mean, there was little tastes of it here and there during that stint. But yeah, honestly, when I was there as an intern, where I was getting the responsibility was more on me. What was great is the studio owner, chief engineer, he he would say, if there was no session booked for the day, come in. He encouraged me to bring in my own projects, you know, um, learn the room, work on the gear, get familiar with the layout of things, on my own time. So, a lot, I definitely did a handful of those things where I would just bring in a friend's band or, whatever, and just learn signal flow and put stuff through different pieces of gear and just mess with things and really figure out what it was doing and learn the layout of it. So I mean, I would say I wasn't really getting sessions at that point that were paying and in that studio specifically, but it was once I moved to Chicago is when I started assisting, which was minimal, and then I kind of just got thrown into the fire doing the engineering thing.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah. So where was I?
In Chicago.
Yeah. So I learned a lot from working with R. Kelly specifically. And at the time there, he was pretty much the biggest thing going there. So I kind of was able to transition and use that to my advantage with other artists. So, word got out and my name started getting on some records and getting credits and stuff like that. So I, had a lot of people calling and asking for me to do sessions with them, specifically at the studio we were working out of, which was called Chicago Tracks. So I kind of made a decision that I wanted to do more of that, a little bit more, have a little bit more diversity in in my sessions, not just doing R. Kelly sessions. So I sort of stepped away from the R. Kelly thing and started doing a lot of freelancing work. And that was, a lot of R&B and hip hop, which, kind of was in the vein of R. Kelly. But even outside of that, I was started doing a lot of rock sessions, a lot of jazz, kind of like gospel, big band stuff. Um, that was kind of stuff that I really cut my teeth on, um, in with me, like mic placement and working on getting isolation between drums and different players when we had a band tracking live. So that was kind of where I cut my teeth doing that, and then through that, I did a project with Ministry, which was really fun. That was really another interesting project with, uh, you know, outside of those guys are really creative and really fun to work with. It was kind of crazy hours again, where we were staying up hours and hours on end. And that was because, I don't know if, I know Chris, you're a fan of Ministry, and but the lead singer, was a big drug guy. So I mean, he would literally be up for 4 days straight.
I think he's possibly the biggest drug guy in the business, but he's productive, so we're going to hand it to him for that.
Oh man, I mean, we used to joke and say you could get high by licking Al's back. Um, So without going to the gory details of all that stuff, that was a really cool, fun project, and that was one of the my kind of first entries into doing a surround mix. The project we were working on was for a movie called AI. It was a Stanley Kubrick movie, and so we did some surround mixes for the song that we were working on for that, and that was really cool, and that kind of whet my palate for the surround kind of post-production thing as well. um so I
Find it
guess moving, what's
a
that?
fairly, to jump in, did you find it a fairly sort of like, without, I guess, being, trained at, college or anything as far as surround sound or post goes, like, did you find that a fairly easy kind of transition going from, studio, like stereo mixes or whatever else into that sort of more surround sound post stuff?
I think the concepts and like the technical stuff is really the same. The you know at the time there was not a lot of consoles that were readily available that did and had surround built into them. It's like music production consoles. So the console we used was an AMEC 9098, which when we did that, and it was fitted for surround. The biggest thing, not to go too technical on this one yet, but the biggest thing is instead of working with the left right, which is you have limited space, not only space width wise but space sonically. When you're working with surround, you've just got so much more space. So I feel like you really had to kind of beef up things, make things bigger because you had a lot more space to fill. So that was just kind of the one thing that, on that level was a little bit different. But I try, on that one anyway, I just approached it as sort of, if I was the person listening, what would I want to hear? Not digging too much and not getting so attached to the music. The mix was already kind of done, the stereo mix, so it was more about branching, spreading it out, and making it kind of do some cool things in some different parts. But for the most part, that was learn. I was still learning as I was going on that one. So yeah. Anyway, so moving on after we'll move on from Chicago. So I got an offer to go work at a studio as a staff engineer in New York, which New York is, hey, that's the next level, right? So why not? Let's go do that. So moved to New York. The stint at Battery Studios there was pretty short lived, but again, I met a lot of people in the few months I worked there, and kind of just had a demand to do freelance stuff. So I continued to do freelancing sessions, a lot of hip hop, a lot of rock. At the time working in Brooklyn, which at the time was like really the new hot, cool, place for indie kind of rock bands. So got a few cool records there, like All American Rejects, which at the time they had a different name when we did their first record. And I cannot remember the name of their band, but they changed it like in the middle of making the first record, to All American Rejects. But that was a really fun record at the studio called Mission Sound in Brooklyn. New York was kind of a crazy whirlwind of rock and hip hop, and working out of all these kind of big studios, Hit Factory, Quad. I'm trying to think of some other studios now off the top of my head. Anyway, a lot of the kind of like big, Power Station or Avatar or whatever it was called at the time. So in that stint of my career, I kind of got a chance to work in these studios that were like on the front page of Mix magazine, and all these amazing these amazing studios, which was really cool. At the time, that was when people were selling records, and record labels were throwing money around like crazy. So there's a lot of projects and a lot of artists I worked with that never actually came to fruition, which is, probably something that's going to happen in your career too. You know, there's going to be a lot of projects you work on that just don't ever come out. You know, they might be near and dear to you and just never come out, unfortunately. So that's something that you'll have to look forward to for sure. Um,
Hey, Dylan, can I just ask, just for everybody playing at home, as far as like these jobs coming into you, did you say have an agent or something that would align you with these artists, or was it, a record company that used you a whole lot, or just word of mouth from artist to artist, or like how did I know it's sort of different every case, but how did that kind of work?
yeah, it was. I would say mostly word of mouth. You know, there was I would definitely try to, when I worked on a project, I was in touch either with the manager or the A&R person for that artist, respectively. You know, if it was a label project, of course. And I would just, stay in touch with those people. You know, unfortunately, too, a lot of times I kind of had to when those band or when the labels pay, they usually do a net 30 or a net 90, which means you don't get paid for 3 months. So, unfortunately, I had to do a little bit of my own, chasing of money and kind of that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, I think it was just really maintaining those relationships with the A&R people or the management and stuff like that, and through word of mouth, and again, back then there was actually physical CDs or records that came out and your name was on there. So some people would find you and, go online and go, oh, hey, this guy did this record, and there was, you could actually find the person that was doing those records. Now that's a little bit harder. That's a whole nother thing, which we can actually talk about in this, about the state of the digital world, and it's a lot harder to get liner notes. I mean, I know iTunes is starting to incorporate the liner notes things into some of their releases, which is great. Great for us, for people that do what we do, because that's how, it's like if a tree falls in the woods, and nobody's around to hear it, did it actually make a sound? Because it's like if your name's not on it, nobody knows you did the record. You could say you did it, but it doesn't really mean anything. So
You credit literally.
yeah, it's been tough on that front. That's one of the bigger things I've noticed, outside of the technical stuff with doing records in the digital realm, is those digital releases now, they don't have credits, or they up until recently haven't really had credits. So that was a real tough go for all engineers, unless you were one of those like humongous guys that everybody knows, Chris Lord-Alge and Tony Maserati and like, Serban and all these guys that were kind of, did really, and that's why they did as well as they did. I think, not only were they great engineers, but they were really good at, playing the politics of keeping in touch and keeping their name just in the forefront of everyone's mind, for all the records that they were doing. So, that's definitely.
Dylan, on that note, we've just got a couple of questions popping up here, and one of them's going along the lines of something like your favorite engineers and producers. Like, is there any, I guess, that sort of stand out to you through your internships and through those sort of early bits? You're like, all right, that guy's got the chops. Like, how does he get that sound? Just stood out to you, like your Chris Lord-Alges or whatever else.
Yeah. um it's a good question. We should have prepped for that one, Chris.
It might have been someone you worked alongside that's a bit of an
Yeah.
unknown. Hey, that guy you took a lot away from that you couldn't have learned elsewhere.
Yeah, there's a lot of engineers that I learned stuff from. That's something, again, that I'll preach in these other master classes as well, is just constantly learning. Like even now, right? I've been doing this for 25 years or whatever, and like by no means do I know it all. I'm always learning, and I'm like on the look, trying to learn. I want to know something that I don't know, and I want to be able to try new things. So I guess, what the answer to that is, there's a lot of engineers that I worked with that I think I learned a lot from. Specifically, trying to think of who comes to mind. I mean, the guy that owned the studio that I interned at in Colorado, his name was Kevin Clock. I learned a lot from him. He actually was the guy that kind of toward this might be a little discouraging too, but sort of towards the end of my internship there, he sort of took me aside and basically said, I don't think you have what it takes, man. Like, you're a great guy. I think you have the passion, but I just don't really think you have what it takes. And for whatever the reason, like, it just lit a fire in me, like at the time I was like angry and sad and, all these things. But I sort of was like, in the back of my head, like, I don't, I do have what it takes. I've sacrificed and I know I can make it in this business, and so it kind of forced me in my head to, I want to prove this guy wrong, So maybe he did, you know what? I need to ask him that. Maybe he actually did that on purpose. I don't know. And I still do communicate with him to this day, not often, but we'll shoot a Facebook message here and there or whatever. Um, that he stands out from a lot of like technical things, and he had a pretty diverse background too, from rock and jazz and reggae, and he did a lot of different things. So I learned a lot of kind of things from him on that front.
On that note, I guess I'll jump in with one of my own questions there. Like, what do you think is the importance of making sure that you're diversifying the genres that you're working on, like throughout? Like, rather than just being like, I'm a rap guy or I just do rock or whatever. Like, what's just really briefly, like, what are the values of diversifying those skill sets across all of those genres?
Right. Yeah, I think today, now more than ever, it's pretty important. I've certainly had, I've certainly lost clients because I wasn't a rap guy or I wasn't a rock guy. Like, but I've also gotten a lot of clients because, they maybe were trying to do a hip hop record, but they didn't want it to sound like everyone else's record. They were like, you understand this genre, but we maybe want to impart some kind of like more rocky elements or more rock feel to it. So I've also, landed some clients with that diversity, for sure. So, I think that's, again, without, like saying this is the only way to do it, but I think now it's important to not only be, able to work with a lot of different genres of music, but a lot of different personalities.
Oh,
Being able to understand, when to talk, when to not talk, understand when there's clients that already have it in their head and you just are the button pusher, and then there's a lot of clients that really need some push and forward progress and need you to kind of help move things along. I guess it's sort of a little bit off the subject, but yeah, just adaptability in that regards, being able to read the room, if you will, and figure out, the needs of the client and almost kind of thinking ahead, if you don't necessarily want to wait for them to ask, because then not at that point they're already impatient. That's kind of goes along with one thing we were talking about too, Chris, is that maybe if you're trying to impress a client, maybe it's a client you've never worked with, be real focused on their needs. And if you see kind of a trend in how they're working, maybe try and keep be ahead of the game without being too eager, but just kind of a little bit of anticipation for what they want and need, on a technical side, and even, the real basics, making them feel at home and comfortable in the space, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. I guess just to add on for other question, flip it on its head a bit. What are the similarities? Like, I asked what the benefits were with the difference of genres in your toolbox. Like, what are some of the similarities? We'll narrow it down to say, like, hip hop versus like rock music that you found, like, in production wise or whatever. Just to touch on production stuff really briefly.
That again, that's sort of a trick question. I think now with the way things are now in the digital world, they're a lot more similar. Um, a lot of people, almost everyone has a workstation at home or some sort of a DAW on their computer that they use to write with, big artists, small artists. So I think a lot of it now is kind of the workflow kind of starts out the same. With the rock thing, obviously there's, or not obviously, typically there's like a band involved, so it's not just a singular artist, you're working with a band. So they come in with a demo, and you're not only having to read and cater to one person, you're sort of trying to make sure everybody's different personalities are catered to, and and then the obvious kind of technical things being setting up and doing drums and guitars, which that's not a typical setup for like a hip hop session or a EDM session or something like that. So I think the similarities sort of end once you get into like the full tracking of things, the recording aspect of it. The way I approach things is, I always try to ask the client for something, an example of what they want, so if they come in with their song, I try to get as much information beforehand, and what sound they're going for, and if they have some examples of some records that are maybe already out, I'm like, hey, give me as much references that you have as possible, so I can kind of wrap my head around where their headspace was at when they were making, this record, like, or demoing it or whatever. So that's across the board, whether we're doing hip hop or rock or jazz or whatever it is, electronic stuff. Give me some examples, and that way I kind of can get an idea of what you're trying to do first. And I think that's important too. Is before I touch a knob, before I set up a mic or do anything, I kind of already have a sketch of like what I want to do, and an intention before I do anything. I'm not just kind of willy-nilly doing anything. I definitely have sort of some standard things that I like to do, but those things change depending on this information that I gather from the artist, or the band beforehand. So that's definitely a good, one thing I do when I'm starting out working with an artist for the first time, is really get an idea of what they're trying to do, and the sound they're going for before I do anything.
Okay. Like, if you've got you've got your solo artists and you've got bands, and it's obviously like when you've got a band in the studio, especially like when you're dealing with, say, a whole lot of ego, that can be a pretty regular thing. How do you go about like managing and balancing that? Because I guess then you're moving away from the technical aspects and twiddling knobs, etc., to like really more a people management / counseling kind of role almost.
Yeah,
that sort of stuff.
for sure. There is definitely a lot of that. I think that, so my background, like I said before, I'm not a musician. I didn't start out playing guitar, drums, or keyboards or anything like that. So, a big chunk of my career earlier in my career was to kind of learn how to like speak that language, to understand, I don't have to have perfect music theory or anything, but I do have to kind of know that some of the terminology and really understand how to communicate with musicians on a musical level. So I think that goes along with part of it too. Some guys are very technical and very much like, hey, take me on, the and of beat 3 of bar 47 punch, like there's guys that think like that. So you really have to um, understand what or who you're dealing with and how they communicate. And I think that again goes back around to the being able to be versatile and adaptable. And that's again where I've sort of shined in my career, is that I've done so many different things with so many different people, and I'm always learning. I'm trying to just keep, use all this information to where like somebody calls me and says, hey, can you do this? And I've never done it before. In my head, I'm like, oh shoot, like, I don't know, I don't want to cuss, but oh crap, like I've never done this, but I know I can make it happen because I can steal from all these different things that I've done to make it happen. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, you're pretty on the money there. As far as like when you were saying that bar 47 beats and whatever else, we should probably explain to everyone like one of your titles is playback engineer. So do you want to go into a little bit about, I guess, give us a couple of clients you've worked with and what you were doing for them that I guess falls under that little bracket, because that's kind of a unique one. Either a studio or a post engineer or whatever, but the playback engineer thing doesn't really come up in common audio speak a whole lot.
Yeah. So I guess just a little bit lead up to that is, so playback engineer is, sort of like the hidden band member, if you will. The all the elements that the band recorded on the record in the studio for the record that you hear on the radio. There's studio magic happening. There's overdubs and fat, thick guitars and different guitar parts happening and different keyboard parts happening, but it's a 4-piece band. How do you recreate that live to kind of get that same sound and feel? So that's where playback comes in. You're supplementing and supporting all the basically you're playing everything that the band can't physically play on stage. you know
Yeah, we are definitely talking about like live concerts, etc., not in the studio, just playing at home.
Yeah, exactly. Live concerts. So, but that's where the studio world and the live playback thing, they intersect and are very similar in a lot of ways. I'm working, if I'm building a playback session for an artist, we'll get into like, you know, some of that stuff in a second. But me kind of coming again from the background of a studio guy, when I'm doing a playback gig, I think like a studio guy, and I know what to ask for. If I know what stems to ask for, and I know what to tell the mix engineer, like, hey, can you give me these stems minus these, or split some extra things out, or can you not limit them for me on these, because it's different things depending on what I need. But I'm dealing directly with, like, say, their mix engineer that mixed the record, because he's got all the multi-tracks and he's got the stems. So as a playback guy, you get all the stems from the record, right? And then you put those in a session, and you just start subtracting stuff, is kind of what starts happening. Is you subtract the live drums, because you got a live drummer and he's performing that live. Then you start subtracting the live bass track, because you've got a bass player. Then you, of course, subtract the vocals, but maybe there's some important key kind of vocal effects or elements that were key to the record and the sound of that particular song, or that particular section of a song. You need those elements ideally you would like to get those elements from the studio because it's as close to the record as possible. If not, we can that's the other part of a playback guy's job is sort of recreating some of those things, maybe doing some separate different EQing that helps the front of house mixer make the tracks sit with the live band in an arena setting or a stadium setting or something like that. So yeah, the playback thing has been, a pretty big chunk of my career now at this point. About 14 years or so I've been doing playback, and I was lucky. One of my first clients that I was working with was Linkin Park, and I started doing playback for them before playback really was a common thing. Now most bands, I would say, have playback. It's become a pretty commonplace for artists, big and small. But at the time when I kind of first started doing it, it was not a real prominent thing. And if anyone out there is familiar with Linkin Park's music, they have a lot of stuff going on in their records. It's not just a rock band up there. They've got DJs and, a lot of programmed drum loops and synth stuff and just like weird effects and, like a lot of really, really ear candy stuff happening. So, yeah, that was my sort of intro to playback, and it was just through word of mouth. I just kept getting calls to do playback for people. It was Linkin Park, and then it was Backstreet Boys, and then it was Linkin Park again, and then it was Jay-Z, Justin Bieber. Like it was just like, it's a small world, and if you kind of establish yourself in that world as a guy that's doing big tours and kind of can sort of deal with that pressure, and the pressure part of that is your system can't stop. You have this, when you hit play, if the click stops going to the band, they start losing time. If you've got time code driving lights and video and all that stuff, which and that stops, then the show stops. So there's a bit of a high stress level involved with doing the playback thing, but it's cool when you get to sit in front of 30,000 people and the show goes off without a hitch and everybody's happy. So the playback thing's definitely a world that's coming up now, and something that I have another company, and that's what we do a little bit more specifically. And it's a really great bridge between studio and live. You're really on the ground floor. You're the guy that's working directly with the mix engineer and then getting that stuff ready with the band to go perform and tour live.
Sure thing. So I guess just to sort of start to round it off, because we're kind of starting to run out a bit of time there, and we've still got a fair few points to go over there.
Yeah.
As far as we've got it noted here as like the importance of adaptability and versatility and whatnot. Like you've kind of gone over a whole bunch of stuff that you've done and looking after your clients and that kind of thing. Like, if you've got anything else to add there about just how to keep yourself like a viable kind of professional in the industry. Like, it's obviously changed a whole lot even in the last 6 months, but we'll touch on that a little bit in a minute. Even in the last 3 to 5 years, is it a matter of keeping up with tech? Would you say that, the manner of dealing in a personal fashion or something has just been a constant? Like, what have you sort of got to say to those points?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at a couple of these questions up here too, and I'll sort of address some of those, like maybe pre-COVID, post-COVID, that kind of thing. I like the how do you become popular as James Charles? That's a really good question. Anyway, no, so yeah, to answer your question, I think I don't necessarily have a formula to tell you, you know. I think that it's really the long and short of it is, number one, you have to be really easy to work with. You have to be able to get along with everybody, even if they're asking for things, you know, as an engineer or a playback engineer or even a producer, you know, like you're hired to fulfill the vision of the artist, right? So you really have to make them feel comfortable and not inhibit their creativity, you know, their creativity. Um, but you also need to be able to help nurture that as well, you know. So it's like you've kind of are playing both sides constantly. So I think that's number one, you know, as far as adaptability and versatility goes, is number one, you have to be able to deal with and handle all personalities, you know, and that's easier said than done for sure. Um, you know, on the technical side, I would say, you know, just really, you kind of have to eat, breathe, live, sleep this stuff, you know. Again, I mean, if you see my shirt here, I wore this for a reason. It's backwards to me. I don't know if it's forwards to you, but it's true. I mean, I kind of do take my career really seriously, and I'm, you know, whether I'm working with an indie artist or Justin Bieber or whoever, I take each session just as seriously as the next session, you know. And I'm not going to I don't treat Justin Bieber any differently than I treat, you know, some brand new up and coming indie artist or singer or whatever. Like, to me, the thing that I get the biggest fulfillment out of is when at the end of a session, or, you know, we finish a mix, or at the end of a show or whatever it is, the artist comes off and they're like high-fiving and they're stoked and their vision has come to life, and you've, you know, helped that happen. That's like what drives me, you know. And again, even on like the small artist level, just being able to offer them something that maybe they didn't ever think that they could get, you know. And I learn from that. And again, that's what drives me and what I really strive for. You know, I guess, so that's number one, be able to work with people. Number two is, you know, being able to not, you know, not necessarily discriminate, like I said, between genre or big, huge, humongous artists versus some indie artists. I think that's a big part of, you know, where, you know, my career has gone. And again, I get fulfillment out of both of those for different reasons. I don't know if that answers the questions. I think I had a third point, but maybe I sort of incorporate hit that into that answer.
Hey, Dylan.
Does that hit the points?
Yeah, we've got Gareth, one of our audio lecturers, jumping in.
Yeah, so hi Dylan. I'm loving it so far. It's great. Lots of really great information here. And specifically, just because it ties in with what we try and push for in the audio course here, is the soft skills side of things, you know, the transferable skills as we call them here, and the importance of that. So the fact that it's a given that you know the technical stuff because you've gone through you've done the years of that. But I'm guessing, just from hearing you talk, the reason that you're getting all these gigs is because you're not a bad guy. You know, you're a good person to work with. And I just want to, I'd like you to talk a bit about how great you are. No, about, you know, just those side of things, how you've kind of nurtured those, the understanding of, you know, I guess it's everything from time management to looking after yourself and that side of things. So yeah, just tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, that's definitely a good question. You know, again, I think it kind of goes along with, you know, this shirt, or, you know, like just the mentality of it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of, you know, it's a lot of just keeping those contacts, making sure you're calling people, making sure you're responding to people's emails in a you know, in a professional manner, and you know, maybe even going that one step more where, you know, you're tired, you know, you've been going back and forth with emails, but you know, maybe like spend that extra time to really give them a PDF that breaks it down, and you know, or pictures or drawings or, you know, whatever, like that make, you know, like maybe on the playback side, if you're putting together a rig or something for somebody, I think it's just, you know, just trying to go that one like extra step. And I think people, they may not appreciate it at the time, if it's crazy, if it's stressful, if it's hectic, but when the dust settles, you know, those things I think stand out. And you know, like maybe a couple of examples would be, you know, in the studio is, you know, just not, I'm, you know, I'm not too humble to go, you know, get just as simple as like go heat up somebody's water because their throat's sore, and you know, rather than like having them go do it themselves, or you know, doing like a playback gig and you're working with the monitor engineer and you've packed up your stuff and you're like ready to go, asking them, hey, can I help you pack up your stuff? Can I help you wrap some cables or whatever it is? Just those kind of like little extra things, you know, and those are the things where somebody asked that monitor guy, you know, 2 gigs from now, hey, I'm looking for a playback guy. And he sticks out, oh yeah, that guy Dylan, he was a great playback guy, but he also helped me pack up my gear. That was like that thing that stood out that some other guys might not do. Yeah, so I mean, I think, you know, it's really just kind of like putting yourself, reversing the roles, you know, put yourself in the other person's position and say, hey, what would I want? What, you know, like that sounds so cheesy and corny and like obvious, you know, but I think, hey, and I would not say I'm that guy that does it all the time, you know, and sometimes I'm like, oh shoot, why didn't I do that? You know, or whatever. But I think that those kind of things, those I think have gone a long way with some of my clients and or the people in their entourage and those kind of things, you know, and that brings up a whole nother subject, you know, like the entourage sometimes can be a real big pain in the butt, but as long as you're super nice and really like go that little bit of extra mile, because that stuff gets back to the artist, that stuff gets back to management, that stuff gets back to the people that are really the ones that are signing the checks and making the calls to hire people, you know. So you know, I think that answers your question.
That's good for me. Yeah, thanks for that.
I might kind of tie in. There's a bit of a question here, just saying, you know, like the benefits of, say, somewhere like SAE versus an online, and I guess versus your way of coming up, like you had a course that you did like end of high school and then sort of went straight into a practical sense. But I don't know, I might have a shot at answering it, and then you can chime in. But it really comes back to those transferable, like, you know, soft skills and being versatile in doing so, and being someone great that people want to work with. So I guess the way that SAE does it is in a little bit more of a structured kind of methodical approach, where we'll put you into studio modules and say, right, you've got to build something with your colleagues, and you'll get critiqued on those different skills in order to, you know, improve and get it pointed out to you, like, hey, like your communication could have been improved here, here's how you can do it. And sort of just makes it really black and white and easy to like grade yourself. But I guess like the truth of it is like, it does matter how you come up, but like everyone sort of does it in a different manner. Have you got anything to sort of say along those lines?
You know, I think me personally, I definitely learn more from touching stuff and doing things and experimenting and just trying to make something, not break it, but I want to know its limitations, you know. And it's hard to do that in a book, you know? So I think, yeah, if I have the opportunity to touch something, play with it, and really understand its limitations, that's how I'm going to learn, you know, knowing how to get it to that, push it all the way to the hardest it can go, to know where I have some leeway, you know, on the technical side. And I think it's, we talked about this too earlier, like the 10,000 hours, and sort of what, to touch on what Gareth said too, is the technical stuff is super important, but it's also the least important, kind of like what, you know, like goes along with what we were saying, you know, the technical stuff needs to be second nature. You need to not even be able to think about what you have to do to get that thing to sound the way you want it to sound, or get it to be able to do what the artist is asking for. That needs to be second nature. And that's only going to come from, you know, putting in your time and staying up for 48 hours, 58 hours at a time, and just doing what you have to do, ingraining that into your brain, the technical stuff, so that when it comes time, when you are like the guy and you get that opportunity to do that session, you're not spending time, the artist's time, trying to figure out, oh, does this sound good, or like, what does this piece of gear do? They're like, hey, can you make this do this? And you can, and you're spending your time now making sure they're comfortable and creative. And that's where you start getting those repeat clients, and that's where you start making a name for yourself.
Yeah, the Jedi level audio wizardry, as they say. Cool, man. Well, look, we might sort of start wrapping it up. There's a few questions in here just along the lines of, you know, state of the industry and stuff. And we won't talk about the whole COVID thing too much, but like, I guess, you know, everyone's talking about it. So it's obviously, you know, hit the whole industry for a bit of a six, but what's your take on where it's at? I guess, like, both, you know, in a studio, like, you know, music being released state, and obviously, like, you know, festivals, which are few and far between at the moment. Yeah, give us your take.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to kind of skim these real quick too, but yeah, let's go pre-COVID first, I guess. Let's talk about kind of where things were going, and, you know, where, for if COVID didn't exist, like, kind of, you know, the way of things. And, you know, let's talk about the studio side of that first. I think the studio side of that it's gone full circle. You know, I mean, again, if you see my studio, I've got an analog desk, I've got a tape machine, but along with that, I've also got, you know, Pro Tools and antelope converters, and, you know, all the kind of like good high-end digital stuff as well. So I think the industry is coming back to less digital. It's evening out. You know, there's a good mix of like the analog hybrid thing now. You know, people have been now recording in their house purely digital, and understanding all these tape emulation plugins and tube saturation plugins and all this stuff. And they're like, well, this stuff sounds really cool. Now maybe I kind of want to check out the real thing and see, like, what's all the hype about, like, for real. Is it really the same? Is it different? So I'm noticing a resurgence in that sort of thing, where artists and clients want to work on tape, want to work in an analog environment, you know, and make some sort of a hybrid. So it's come full circle from being all digital and like working on your laptop. That's definitely a big part of it. But this world's kind of coming back into the mix. The live world is kind of the opposite. It's going away from analog almost entirely. It's like everything's digital now. There's, you know, you've got the Dante protocol and Maddie and all these like really high throughput, you know, digital protocols that are just a single, you know, Ethernet cable now. And that's how this front of house snake is, the monitor snake, the, playback world. Everybody's living in that world now. So, in where the studio's maybe digressing in technology a little bit and going back in time and understanding that that's still a really important part of the sonic palette, the live world is going more towards, which makes sense. Digital's smaller, it's a smaller footprint, which means it's lighter and it's cheaper to send around the world. And instead of running a humongous, fat, huge snake everywhere, you just run one Ethernet cable, and it's like becoming cheaper and, just a little bit more portable and in that world. So being on the cutting edge of things in that world, in the live environment, I think is really important, and technology in general is just changing so fast. So that's kind of those states.
Roll the 100-meter multi-core snake up a muddy field can be very happy about having Ethernet. So
yes, exactly.
What about sort of, I guess, let's just do it, the COVID side of things, kicking the festivals for a six?
Yeah, this is all theory, obviously, at this point, but the insider information that I know and have gotten is that, there's no tours going to happen, at least until this time next year. I know it's your guys' winter, it's summer here, which is festival, it's go time here, and it's dead. And it's probably not going to gear up until this time again next year, and when it does, it's going to be a different world. There's going to be, these artists are going to find it a lot harder to really make money and get their margins right and put on good, big, nice, productions for fans and not have to charge two firstborns for a ticket, so that it's going to be interesting to see how that works. I know there's going to be a lot more, the promoters are going to take on less responsibility and less risk. They're going to lean a little bit more on the artists to do that because they can't afford to, take on all the risk in a market where they are only selling 50 or 60% of the tickets that they were selling, So it's going to be really interesting. I think it's the Zoom thing, the live streaming thing, the pre-recorded kind of festivals thing. I think that's going to maybe not totally take over, but I think that's not going to go away. I think they're going to supplement some of that digital streaming stuff. And I think you'll start seeing more of that technology pop up, like the virtual reality, augmented reality kind of like shows, if you will.
Wow. So I guess like you were telling me before, like you're doing stuff with Black Eyed Peas for like for not a Zoom thing, but like an online kind of performance thing. So again, that's sort of an example of like something you maybe wouldn't have known how to do like 5 years ago, and you're like, I've got to adapt to this like right now. How do I do it? What have I got to learn? Is it seamless? What's the redundancy like, etc. So that's Dylan's problem for the last 3 months as far as new learnings go.
Absolutely, that's absolutely the world that's happening now. So it's adapting, learning to wear a mask for 12 hours straight every day, because you can't be interacting with people without a mask, and it's a crazy world, man. It's going to be real interesting. But out of all this, I think, talking about the music side of it, on both live and studio, I think there's going to be a lot of great music that comes out of this because people are at home. And what do you do at home when you're creative? Like write music. And that's when all this, like during all this turmoil, with all the crazy Black Lives Matter stuff that's happening and, all these kind of things, there's this like turmoil, and that breeds like creativity and some like cool, politically charged, and that's like the 60s, that's the kind of stuff that really
Fuel on the fire.
pushed music to like a new place, so I think soon we're going to start hearing some stuff we've never heard before, and stuff that's really going to like be powerful on that front.
Yeah. I guess like with, people having time on their hands, it kind of creates that demand for like more content than ever. So,
For sure.
like I'm aware of a lot of, record companies that really haven't cut their budget. They're like, look, get in the studio, keep recording. We can do that. Say festivals aside, like there's still that demand for content, and I think they know it. So, now's kind of the time to get in and press record.
Yeah. I mean, that everyone content is king, and it always has and always will be, and even more so now, I think. So the more you can, you know, diversify, adaptify, vertilicify yourself and be able to do a bunch of different things, that's where you're going to be able to make a living doing this job. Like you can't just do one. It's rare that you can just get by doing one thing, in my opinion anyway. I mean, there's a handful of people that do, but I think you have to really be able to do a bunch of different things, because you know everyone knows how to do something. So if you know how to do a bunch of things, that you've got things to fall back on. And again, I hate to say it, but I do say it, is like, kind of fake it till you make it. If something new is thrown at you and you're a little intimidated by it, again, that's why you have to be open to like learning it, and, just be good and cool and easy to work with. Because even if you don't know the technical stuff, the being cool and easy to work with goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. Well, look, we've kind of touched on the whole state of the industry stuff. So I guess like maybe a little bit of Q&A just to wrap it up. And like, sorry to people attending that are asking the more technical questions. So I'll just throw this in while I've got everyone there. This is the part one of 3 of these sessions. So part 2, we're going to be talking about stuff along the lines of, more in the studio stuff. So Dylan's going to give us a whole tour of the studios in LA there and talk about, signal flow and post-production and a whole bunch of different technical stuff. So we're probably going to save a lot of those more technical questions for that seminar. That'll be going on the 6th of August, which is Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel. And you'll be getting an email about that one over in the next couple of days. That'll be coming through on the same email thread as you receive the invite for this seminar. And then on the 3rd of September, we've got another session going on that'll be going into more about mixing and Pro Tools session techniques. So that's where we'll get like really down and gritty with like exactly what Dylan's doing with the mixes and stuff there. So don't worry, we do have that stuff covered. We've just decided to spread it out into 3 different parts just so you can soak it all up. But yeah, just to start to round it off a little bit, because we've run out of time. But yeah, we do have Casey over in the panelist column, Casey Morley, who's able to answer any questions for those of you that are thinking about studying at SAE. We're going to be sending out a feedback form for just to give some feedback on how you enjoyed this seminar. And if there's anything that we missed covering there, like feel free to throw in those questions into that form. And we can try and address it in the next one and just make sure that everyone's got the answers that they're looking for. Hey, Dylan, is there any other comments or questions there that you want to address?
Yeah, I'm kind of skimming through them here. This one's actually, there's a couple really good ones here.
Got a little bit of time there.
So I'll go back up here. There's one, so this, another guy, Dylan Locking asked, would you recommend attending a university to learn music theory, or do you think that online courses would be sufficient in today's society? I mean, I think if I could do it all over again, I would, and I had the time, I think I would go and do a music theory class, whether that was at university or whatever. I mean, there's so many cool resources online now, that's probably, a good thing that would give you a good jump start in being able to communicate with like musicians.
Something there, like the bonus of like SAE, because we do get this question a lot, bonus of SAE versus those online things is you are getting like industry practice professionals, but they're giving like real-time feedback on the processes. So, even as far as dialing in knobs, just like asking why is it that you're doing that and really making you understand like what your ears are telling you rather than just intuition.
I think,
So
yeah, I definitely think, yeah, that real-time feedback is important for sure. Um, the other question that kind of stood out to me was one of these recent ones. Do you, oh, where'd it go? What's, no, wait, where'd it go? There was one that asked about being humble but not being taken advantage of. I don't know where it went, but that was an interesting one. I learned the hard way on a lot of those things. I definitely got my time taken advantage of, and you got to think about this. And it, my wife's put this into perspective for me. Like, we're high school sweethearts. She's literally been this involved in this world since I was. We met right as I was getting into it, and she's been with me through thick and thin through all this, and was kind of like my manager for a long time. But the biggest thing, is this is, when you pay to go to SAE, and you've paid with your time as an intern and all these things, like that's your intellectual property. So if somebody's asking you a question or they need something from you, you're worth money to make that happen, because you've put in the time, you've put in the effort, you've also spent money on these courses and all these things. So again, I learned the hard way. I gave a lot of stuff away for free on that front, like people calling me on the phone, hey, can you help me do this, can you help me do that, can you do this, all these kind of things. And I would say, that if somebody really truly wants something and cares about like the quality of things, they should pay for it. And so again, I learned the hard way in a lot of that stuff, but I definitely, that's kind of what I tell people. And when I'm negotiating on a project or something, is that if somebody's trying to lowball you, of course you want to take the gig, but at the same time, your time is worth something, and it's worth a lot more than than that like $400 that they're trying to pay you to mix a whole record or something like that. If you're coming up, I get it, but at a certain point, you're being taken advantage of. And that, that's the other thing that I do with my other company, is that the playback stuff, on a completely side note, is we try to keep the rates up for people. We don't, I'm not a fan of undercutting. It's not worth it to get the gig to only make a few $100s. And it's not about the money either, but it's more about you get what you pay for, and I truly do believe that, and if you want something done right, you got to hire the right people, and it might cost you a little bit more, but honestly, to get it done right the first time, then have to go and remix your record again, or whatever it is, stand your ground, and really, if this is what it's worth it for you and your time and your intellectual property and the schooling that you've done, you need to stick to your guns. So that's definitely I've not practiced what I've preached all the time, and I'm kind of just learning that in my career now. So
yeah, just one last one, I guess, to finish up on, just as far as like, now it's kind of interesting time without using the C word. Just as far as like looking after yourself, be it on the road or in the studio, or dealing with difficult clients or projects when you're like under stress and stuff, like, can you just touch on like the importance of, looking after your mental health and, just balancing out like your general health when, because doing, like you said, the 50-hour days or whatever, like it's, working long concert or show days, like it's really easy to torture yourself pretty quickly if you don't really, practice those kind of good habits.
yeah, again, I probably, have not been the healthiest throughout my career. But I would say now, I meditate every day. I do. And I think I've done a lot of stuff through my career, like you all know at this point. And yeah, being on the road takes its toll, I've got a family at home, I've got kids, I've got a wife, and that, number one, you miss those people, but what do you do with your time while you're out there on the road? Do you do constructive things or destructive things? And again, I've done both. I'm not gonna say I'm took the best care of myself all the time, but now for sure I've been in the habit of meditating every day. I've been in the habit of being able to be humble and grateful and gracious for all the people that I've met in my career, and people that are involved in my life now. So I know it sounds very like not trying to preach that, but for me right now, in where I'm at after doing this for 25 years, I think that I'm at the point where the meditations and stuff like that really do help me and help me center, and now I feel like it's like step 2 of my career. I'm kind of coming at it from a different place, with a really open mind and a really open headspace. There was a point in time where I hated music. I couldn't stand music because I was just around it all the time. And it was like, when I would get home, I didn't want to listen to music because I was just like working on music all the time, and that's a bummer, because that's why I got into this business, because I love music. So that also helped me to enjoy music again. And so that's what I do now, and I've definitely seen a lot of great results from doing that kind of thing.
I guess I did let's just drill down on that really quickly for those attending. And I know there's heaps of sort of stuff about meditation and stuff out there, but what does that look like for you? Are you waking up and meditating for half an hour or something like that, and having a smoothie, or how does your general day look as far as a professional engineer?
Yeah, so I try to first thing in the morning, wake up, set my intention, and meditate. And it's it could be 5 minutes, it could be 30 minutes. Just kind of, without getting into the technical stuff, I've had some people that have shown me and kind of guided me in that, and some techniques and whatever. But yeah, I like to, I wake up, and that's the first thing before I go and wake up my kids and make them breakfast or whatever, when I'm around, or if I'm on the road. If I'm on the road, it's a lot easier to take that time for myself. And I sometimes I'll do it a few times a day. I'll tell you, it's just like anything. It's like going on that run or that bike ride. It's really hard to do, but once you do it, I don't know anybody that's after they exercised that they were like, oh, that was horrible, I'm never doing that again. You feel great afterwards, and the meditation, I think, is part of that. It makes you feel great after you do it, and it helps me. I think it helps me with getting back to what we talked about, just working and being calm and collected and together and focused when I'm working with an artist. And I think that translates into repeat business for sure.
Oh, awesome. Hey, yeah, that's kind of a nice note to end up on. So we might finish it up there. But hey, to all those attending and playing from home, like I said before, you're going to be receiving an email about the next 2 sessions that are coming up, 6th of August and 3rd of September. So they're a little while away, but keep an eye out for them. And we'll be getting into more of the technical aspects, studio session stuff, and more the Pro Tools nitty gritty. So yeah, make sure you come along to that. Tell a friend or two, and yeah, if you've got any questions, then throw them in the feedback form that's coming your way shortly. But look, yeah, Dylan, thank you heaps for taking the time out. I know it's probably past midnight in LA there, so super appreciated.
Yeah, it is. No worries. Like I said, I I love this stuff. We could just talk forever about it.
Well, yeah, let's definitely do that soon, man.
Well, hopefully we'll see virtually some of the same people for these other master classes. We'll get a little bit more nerdy on the next ones for sure, and less about me, more about cool stuff.
Indeed. And just to give a little spoiler to those at home, you guys are going to be getting a little sample pack before the session. So Dylan's sharing a little bit of some studio sessions there, so you can have a bit of a muck around with it. Practice some mixing of yourself in real time with him. So yeah, stuff should get interesting around about the 6th of August. So yeah. In the meantime, everyone, we're going to call it a day there. So, wash your hands, look after yourself, give the meditation a bit of a go if you haven't before. And thanks very much, Dylan. We'll call it a day.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And again, thanks for everybody that tuned in. And, thumbs up to everybody. I'm looking at all your Q&As and, thanks for the questions. Hopefully, maybe Chris, next time we spend a little bit more time on questions, because there's like some really good ones here that I think are cool. So maybe some people remember your questions, and we'll try and get to some more of those on the next one.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be downloading this whole question thread here and going through it all. So yeah, we'll definitely allocate a little when this time around.
Okay. Awesome. Cool.
All right,
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you so much. Great.
Awesome. Take care.
Enjoy. Yep, you too. Bye.